there and welcome to episode 39 of Fixing a Hole, the Beatles podcast you didn't know you needed. My name's Mark Wakely. I'm the producer and purely the idiot in the room, basically. But what we're going to do is introduce our Beatles wizard. And you are a wizard.
I thought you was going to say the other idiot in the room.
Paul Humbly, everybody.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Fixing a Hole.
Excellent. Right then, so last time we talked about the Beatles in 1966 and the end of their touring days and, of course, Revolver being released. What we're going to talk about this week, Paul?
We're going to focus this episode on Ringo, and we're going to do a deep dive into his 1973 solo album, or was it a solo album? All will be revealed, that was called Ringo. Wonder how he thought of that title.
Yeah, it must have taken him ages. There's probably a committee meeting where they thought, what should we call it? Yeah. Okay, I should have been called Bongo.
Why Bongo?
There's a great Morecambe and Wise thing.
There is.
Yeah, which I've talked about before and I'm not going to talk about again. Of course, Ringo gets a bit of funny press about this because he wasn't one of the major songwriters. He did do a few bits and pieces. You know, his voice is definitely Ringo's voice, if you know what I mean. You can tell it. And he was the drummer. And they always say, what do you call a person who hangs around with musicians? A drummer. So anyway, let's have a little talk about Ringo and the fact that he gets creatively a little bit of bad press.
And it's interesting because when I sat down to put this episode together, I thought, better look at the period sort of between 69 and 73 and see what Ringo did. And, you know, the film he makes with Peter Sellers, The Magic Christian, gets released. He makes two solo albums, one Sentimental Journey, which is an album of standards that he records for his mum. He makes a country and western album, Bukua Blues. He also releases two hit singles, Back Off Boogaloo in 72, It Don't Come Easy in 1971, which I think is a great single. Also, in the UK, the gap that's been vacated by the Beatles breaking up has been taken over by Mark Bolan and T-Rex, and Ringo makes a film called Born to Boogie, which is a film of T-Rex in concert. He also appears with another big teen heartthrob of this period, David Essex, who, if you're a UK music fan, you'd be very aware of how big he was in the early 70s. And Ringo appears in the film That'll Be the Day. So there's actually a lot that he's done.
I forgot all about the That'll Be the Day stuff.
Yeah, it's a great
plays
film.
Like a teddy boy, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's
it's quite a dark film.
It is. And it's interesting because in the follow-up film, Stardust, for those who've never seen it, make a point of looking for That'll Be the Day and its follow-up film, Stardust. That'll Be the Day is about how in the 1950s, early 60s, all of these groups got together and formed bands. Basically the story of the Beatles.
Yeah.
And then Stardust is about how one of those bands becomes the biggest group in the world.
That'll be the Beatles again.
Yeah. However, when it comes to Stardust, Ringo's role in the film got taken by Adam Faith, who actually does a really, really good
and also, no spoilers here, but Stardust is also quite a big critique of the modern pop world or rock world at the time as well.
But yeah, if you've never seen those films, highly recommend them. Highly recommend them.
They are really good films.
So yeah, Ringo, he's the drummer in this band, and you know, as we said, you know, he doesn't do a lot of songwriting or anything, but he's actually filled his time. And there was one other thing he's done. He's actually worked as a session musician on a lot of the Apple recording artists' albums like Doris Troy, Billy Preston, etc. So he's been acting, directing, making music. He's been very busy.
It's like he's got a proper job and everything, isn't it? So this album, Ringo, as very imaginatively titled, there is talk that this is a bit like a Beatles reunion album. Who's actually on the album?
So, John, George, and Paul.
Do you know what? That's definitely a Beatles reunion album, isn't it?
However, what you have to remember is that obviously there was still litigation going through the courts at this time about dissolving the Beatles partnership, and the business issues that involved, breaking up this corporation as it was. It sort of suggested that's why Paul was never in the room with the other three at any one time, whereas John, George and Ringo did actually record together. And at one point, the rumour mill was doing overtime because Klaus Voormann, who did the cover design for Revolver and more recently the Anthology series, and had been a member of Manfred Mann and played with the Plastic Ono band, John's project, was in the studio in Los Angeles with John, George and Ringo. And so it was, this is the new Beatles. Klaus has taken over from Paul. But no, they were just making music for Ringo's new album. But you also have John writes a song for Ringo called I'm the Greatest. George is writing music with Ringo and giving him solo songs. George even writes a song with Mal Evans called You and Me, Babe. But one of the best songs on this album, and also a great single, is Photograph. Really great song. And Paul and Linda McCartney contribute a song called 6 O'Clock. So it is a reunion of the members of the Beatles. It's just a shame that they weren't all together at the same time.
How many of the songs did Ringo actually write?
I'll better get my copy
out
here.
He's got his copy here. Ringo.
1, 2, 3, 4. So he's involved in the writing of 4 of them.
Oh, involved in the writing.
Yeah. He's writing with George, and he's also writing with Vinnie Poncia, I think that's how you pronounce his name. Mm-hmm. So he has got some writing input into this album. It isn't just being, offered up songs. And Photograph is the song that he writes with George. So,
of course, any album that is made like this needs a good producer, because if you're bringing in lots of writers and musicians all playing different parts and so on, you need someone to coordinate it. I think in the past you've said that Ringo used a number of producers for the work he was doing. Who produced this album and how good a job did they do?
So this album is produced by a very well-known producer called Richard Perry. And if you think, I don't know any of his work, he had actually worked on Ringo's Sentimental Journey album, where he produced and arranged one of the songs on there. But if you think you've never heard of a Richard Perry production, I'd draw your attention to the Carly Simon song, You're So Vain, because he produced that, and that is one of the best songs from the early 70s American rock era that I think you can talk about. But he also produced Art Garfunkel, Diana Ross, Leo Sayer. He was a very highly regarded producer, and I think as we'll get into when we talk about this album, he probably had a lot to deal with when it came to some of the other musicians who were playing on this album.
Well, I think that's the point I made about producers. Someone has to corral all these.
So I think not only was he producing the music, he was probably trying to get them sober as well. And, he does an excellent job on this album. It is an album, previously, as we've said, Ringo's done an album of standards. He's done an album of country music, and the target audience for those is very limited. Whereas with this, it is very much to be an album that's put out there to get to attract the everyday, pop rock music fan.
Well, and of course, all albums or all records are commercial products. That's obviously he's looking for a particular market. So I've never seen this before. It's not an album that I'm aware of, mainly because I probably didn't think it was worth looking at. So I'm looking at the cover right now. This to me has got a little bit of Sgt. Pepper pastiche to me. Yeah. So it's almost like a cartoon cover, but there's a lot of people on here on a sort of a balcony, theatre balcony, and they're not the actual people; they're drawings of the people. But there's loads and loads of recognisable faces there. I can see John in there, for example, and George and Paul. The other thing I find quite interesting is is the drawing of Ringo looks an awful lot like Pete Townsend. Pete Townsend during his very beardy phase.
Yeah.
I looked at it, I thought, what's Pete Townsend doing on the front of that album? But there is a whole load of, and I'm sure if we sat down and went through this, they're all recognisable characters.
Yeah, I think,
and there must be about, there must be 100 people on there.
Yeah, and I think also some of them represent songs or the lyrics of songs, etc., or events in Ringo's life.
And there you are, right at the back there, the little Beatles wizard. If you want to know what Paul looks like, go and look at the album, and sort of to the right at the back, there's a wizard. The Beatles wizard is on there. But it's an interesting. It is definitely a little nod to Sgt. Pepper, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this and I can see Nicky Hopkins, Billy Preston, members of the band. When I say the band, I don't mean Ringo's band. I mean the band.
Oh, as in...
the band.
Leave on, no.
Yeah. But yeah, it's...
Robbie Robertson and all that lot.
But I think also, if you go back to the period when this was produced, there was a lot of promotion put together by, Capitol Records and Apple. There's lots of pictures of Ringo on top of the Capitol building in Los Angeles.
Oh, right. Okay.
If you're not aware of it, but the Capitol headquarters.
I just think it looks like a stack of records.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It was designed to be a stack of records, 7-inch singles on a spindle.
I notice your copy here is a MFP copy.
Oh, we mustn't talk about that just yet.
Oh, right, okay, is that coming? But the other thing I quite like is you paid £1.99 at Woolworths.
At Woolworths, yeah.
Still got the sticker on it.
We'll go into the detail of the releases.
Releases, oh dear, plural.
Yes,
there we go.
Yeah. But yeah, there was a lot of marketing activity around this album, and I think probably EMI, Capitol, and Apple had thought, well, actually he's had 2 hit singles in 71 and 72. Let's follow this up with an album with a lot of promotion behind it, rather than just let him do another country album or whatever he wants. Let's really push him, and it worked.
Was he a big country fan?
Yeah.
Obviously, he did the Beatles stuff, where there's quite a country twang to it.
Yeah.
But, obviously that was something that he really liked.
Yeah. I mean, his most recent solo album, and we're recording this in 2026, so that came out in 2025. That's a country influenced album.
Oh, that's interesting.
If you go back through, all his solo albums, they always have either one or a few songs with a country influence. And, and Ringo himself says, when you watch the anthology and he's talking about his early years, country music was a big influence on him. It was on George as well. George talks about some of the early country artists and even people like Carl Perkins. It's easy to forget, because we think, Carl Perkins wrote Blue Suede Shoes. But he was on the Sun Records label, but he was originally there as a country artist, and he was a big influence on the Beatles.
That's interesting, yeah, because obviously there is that country thing which seems to run through what he does, right from the Beatles days and right through, as you said, to even the present day. So we talk about the producer and the fact that he had a bit of a job there, and probably wore a top hat and had a whip there as the ringmaster, trying to get them all in the right place. Where did they record this album?
The majority of it was recorded in Los Angeles at Sunset Sound, which is a very famous independent studio that was used by the likes of Phil Spector and Brian Wilson. It was also recorded at A&M Studios in Los Angeles, but it was also recorded in London at Apple Studios. And it's easy to forget that in the early 1970s, that one of the best recording studios in the UK was actually Apple Studios, that was in the basement of the Apple building at 3 Savile Row, which you see during the Get Back filming documentary. But, once that documentary had been made, they seriously went about turning it into a studio. And a lot of that was under the direction of Jeff Emerick, who'd engineered Revolver and Sgt. Pepper. And not only was it, the best recording studio in the UK, they also had the best UK mastering engineer, George Peckham, or George Porky Peckham. If
it's a porcupine cut.
Exactly. A lot of UK pressings from the 70s, albums and singles have that legend on the run out groove. And a lot of artists, including The Who and the Rolling Stones, would get their albums mastered at Apple Studios. Even David Bowie had masters cut there. And so it's weird. You can see, copies of Rolling Stones, I think it's Sticky Fingers and Get Your Yayas Out, that are on Apple test pressings, because that's where they were cut.
That's interesting.
And so Apple was...
I bet they're worth a couple of quid, aren't they?
Oh, they are. But yeah, and so Ringo actually, uses the studio that he owns.
That's handy.
Yeah.
Just a quick aside again, just things I'm thinking of as we're chatting. Did the Beatles ever do any other stuff at Apple Studios other than the stuff we know about from Get Back?
Recordings for other Apple artists...
but not Beatles albums.
But not Beatles albums.
Nothing from Let It Be or from...
well, Let It Be is music that's recorded during the Get Back
Get Back,
session.
of course it is. Yes, sorry. I realise now.
For those completists out there, yes, we know that there are other elements that were recorded later. But, to answer your question, no, there wasn't.
Yeah, I suppose by that point they'd thought, well, that's it for us. And they did Abbey Road.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
And they recorded the other way around, weren't they? So... Let It Be, most of Let It Be was recorded before the Abbey Road album.
Yeah, and some of Abbey Road was also recorded at Trident Studios, which at the time...
In the West End.
In Soho.
Soho, that's right. Yeah.
And they used that because, initially it was the first studio with 8-track recording, which EMI had, but they hadn't actually switched it on. And also because it was an 8-track studio and, they had the experience of using it. Even when EMI got the 8-track working, they would still use Trident because it was just more convenient because they were used to using it.
I know it was a very thought of facility at the time.
Yeah.
So we look at the album. How successful was the album? I mean, was it as successful as... the Paul McCartney album and the Plastic Ono stuff and George Harrison's output?
It was. I mean, in the UK, it gets to number 7 in the UK charts and earns a gold disc. In the United States, it gets to number 2 and gets certified platinum. There's 2 hit singles off of it, Photograph and You're 16. Both of which, become hit singles, not only in the UK and the USA, but, across the world. And it's interesting that, following this success, John sends Ringo a telegram in which he says, "Congratulations, how dare you? Please write me a hit." Which is typical John Lennon's, sarcasm. But at the end of the day, it's him saying, showing how pleased he is that Ringo, who is the underdog of the Beatles when it comes to recording, has actually had, a hit album and 2 huge hit singles.
Is he the one that didn't fall out with any of them? Yeah. I know during the White Album he left, for the want of a better phrase, because he was just bored. Yeah. But is he the one who carried on talking to them all the way through this?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. He's less of a prima donna than the other 3, obviously.
It's very easy to say that they didn't talk to each other or meet each other. That's the simplified version of it, and I've even said it in this podcast. Paul isn't in the studio when, John and George and Ringo are during the recording of this album. But during this period, Paul does meet with John. Again, it's one of these situations. If you know where to look for it, there is a recording of John, Paul, Harry Nilsson, Stevie Wonder recording together. If you think you're going to hear, some hits in the making, you're not. It's basically a load of drunks recording some music together, and was never intended to be, heard by the public. But it just goes to show that even at the end of the day, with all these business struggles going on, there were times when they did talk to each other. Yeah,
it sounds like a musical version of Derek and Clive.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Again, thank you for all your research and all the work you put into this and dragging things up from your memory. That's really fantastic. episode 40 next week. We've got a big 40th birthday episode. Well, I don't know, have we? But it is our 40th episode birthday, for the want of a better phrase. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, I was thinking, we've obviously talked about the Beatles in every episode. And as we've just finished in this particular episode, we've focused on Ringo and his solo album. And we've done the same for John, Paul and George. But there are a group of other people that are key to the story of the Beatles. There's Mr. Epstein, Mr. Martin, Mr. Evans and Mr. Aspinall. And so I thought, let's give a little brief overview of how important and how key those people were to the story of the Beatles.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the other members of the team, basically.
Yeah, the people who I think you could really say collectively were the fifth Beatle.
Oh, that's controversial. Always controversial. It's Billy Preston, by the way. But that's controversial.
Or is it Pete Best?
No, it's definitely Billy Preston.
Or is it Stuart Sutcliffe?
No, it's definitely Billy Preston. Right, okay then. A couple of things just to tell you about. Patreon. If you go onto patreon.com/fixingahole, you will be able to hear an extended version of this podcast. You may be listening to the extended version. If you are, congratulations, you found it. If not, and you're listening to the one that popped into your inbox on Sunday morning, go to the Patreon and there's a longer version of what we've been talking about, and hopefully more interesting. I would like to think so. Not that we're not interesting anyway, Paul.
Equally as interesting, I
Equally.
would say.
Very good, very good.
Just more detail.
He's very on brand, isn't he? If people want to complain about the long version, no. If people want to get in contact with us, what's the best way of getting in contact with us, Paul?
They can email the podcast at info@fixingahole.co.uk or via the Facebook page, Fixing a Hole. They can direct message myself and Mark, or contact us via the Patreon page.
Talking about the Patreon very quickly again, we're going to have loads more stuff available on that. And next week we will give you loads of information on what is going to be available. And we're going to put some of it behind a paywall because we're putting so much work into this. We feel we should get at least a little bit of a reward. So that's what we're going to be doing. But we will tell you much more about that next week. So if you want to know more, listen to next week's podcast and we'll be able to tell you more. If not, go to the Patreon page and there'll be stuff on there as well. The main thing about the Patreon is there'll be more stuff and you'll get early access and a longer version of the actual podcast that we release that comes to you on a Sunday morning. The other thing is we're going to have a new website for the podcast as well, which we will also tell you about in next week's podcast. And there'll be a website with a proper website address and everything, and you'll be able to go and have a look at stuff there as well. Right then, Paul. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. As always, it's a pleasure to come into the Fixing a Hole HQ over here in Telford in Shropshire in the UK and record another episode. And as always, I want to thank all of our listeners for taking time to tune into Fixing a Hole, the Beatles podcast you didn't know you needed.
Thank you very much, Paul. We will speak to you very soon indeed.
This is a 1386 audio production.